Yeah.
Hello and welcome into another episode of the Outsider Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Drew Landry. And before we get started with today's program, want to give a quick shout out to my friends at the Mediocre Movie Club. The Mediocre Movie Club is a self-professed group of idiots who give above average, nothing great, nothing terrible, looking for that satisfactory, right in the middle set of averages there, that whole middle ground of reviews on movies, TV shows, music, anything that you can think of that's in media. You can find the Mediocre Movie Club on Facebook by going to its webpage at Mediocre Movie Club. You can also find them on X at Mediocre Movie CL, Instagram, and also Threads at Mediocre Movie Club. Also, you can go to their website and see what they're reviewing and join in on the conversation at mediocremovie.club. That's mediocremovie.club. Now, my guest today is uh, Lubbock mayoral candidate and community organizer Adam Hernandez. Adam, thanks for being on The Outsider. I appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
All right. So, just I'm going to ask some questions that are, I don't know if you've been asked these questions. Maybe you have, maybe you've talked about them. I think you've answered a few of these, but it's always good to just kind of give a good refresher as to what's going on and all that. So I'm curious here. Let's talk about your where you grew up. You grew up in Lubbock, right?
Yeah, born and raised here in Lubbock.
Great. And where'd you go to high school?
I graduated from Estacado High School in 1999.
Very nice, very nice. Okay. And tell us what that was like on that side of town. That had to be different than what other people you've met in the campaign, and just kind of just paint us a picture here.
Yeah, so from pretty early on, I got a sort of a comprehensive look at Lubbock on accident. So when I was very small, we actually went to Rush Elementary, and the only reason we were able to do that is because there was a little rundown trailer park that we lived in that was tucked right behind the Whisperwood community, which folks in Lubbock will probably know Whisperwood is a pretty affluent community, always has been. But there was this little trailer park right behind it, and it was on the access road of the northwest loop over there. And it doesn't even exist there anymore. But that's where we lived. That's sort of where all of the poorer students of Rush lived. And so we were able to go to Rush. And the reason why we lived there is because my dad, at least in our world, had a pretty decent job, which was he was a truck driver. So he was on the road a lot, but he made pretty decent income. And so I suppose my parents were trying to increase our opportunities or whatnot. And so that's how we ended up there. I was there until fourth grade, finished fourth grade there, went to fifth grade at Roosevelt. And that was because my parents had divorced by that time. And we lived all the way over now in East Lubbock at my dad's mom's house. And so went to Roosevelt from fifth to through ninth grade, and then 10th grade through graduation went to Estacado. And so I sort of had all of that experience, but yeah, it's a very different life, if you will, living in Lubbock in that side of town, even today. There's been some slight improvements over time, but for the most part, it still looks just like it did when I was growing up. And as a matter of fact, after we stayed in my dad's mom's house for a while, we stayed in this little tiny house even further east, out on 4th Street, sort of closer to Roosevelt, but still very far away from Roosevelt. Um, and that area, all of the roads are still dirt, and they still look exactly the same as when we were growing up. And so, not a lot of change experienced over there versus on the other sides of town. Obviously, there's been lots and lots of change.
You I want to fast forward several years to when you started to become politically active. Now, I've heard you talk about how you read the disparity report and that kind of spurred your political activism. Did you have any activism before then? Were you just did any sort of political mindset, any sort of curiosity before the disparity report, or was it, or that was it, and then everything else is after that?
In the sense of getting involved in the actual political process, not really. I was aware of things. I've been very interested in history for a very long time. So I started reading as much history as I could in my teens. And so the only sort of activism that I had around that time was just within my own family. And so in the Hispanic community, it may surprise a lot of folks out there to know that there is quite a bit of racism in the Hispanic community when it comes to Black people in particular. And then you have a different dynamic on the other side where there's sort of like an aspiration for a lot of folks in the Hispanic community to either be closer to white or pass as white, those sorts of things. And so it's a really strange dynamic, which itself has a long, there's a lot of history behind why that is, right? And so when I started to learn all of those sort of things, it started to really bother me because I've always sort of seen everybody as equal. I had been around every kind of people from the time that I was born. And so I didn't really, I guess I just didn't have those biases in the way that a lot of my older family members had because they just grew up in a different culture. They weren't ever really around anybody else other than the Hispanic community and oftentimes just our immediate family. And so there was a lot of ignorance there. Of course, a lot of anecdotal incidents got sort of painted with a broad brush for the entire community. So if they had some run in with a Black person that they didn't like, they would automatically put that on the entire Black community, things of that nature. So it really did bug me. And then especially, so I was a young father. I had my first daughter when I was 19. And so even as they were growing up and we would be around family and they would make certain jokes or they would say certain things, I would turn into somewhat of an activist. I wanted to break that cycle. And so I was successful within my own family. Obviously, that alienated me from some of my family members, which is okay. But yeah, so that's sort of, I guess that's the only real sort of like activism in that sense that I had at that time. For the most part, I was just trying to build my business and maintain my business and raise my family for a long time. So it just wasn't something I thought about a whole lot. And that is because when I was growing up, not only did I not have like sort of this normal family structure where a lot of people will inherit things, right? You'll inherit your political views or your religious views or whatever. I just didn't have that sort of situation. And so, on top of that, when we were growing up in the 90s as people of color, obviously hip hop was becoming a big genre of music. And even in our music, it was talked about like how voting was pretty much useless for us. It didn't really work. It's not something we should spend time doing. And then even the sort of elder people in our community, or the people that were older than us anyway, would sort of give us those messages. And so over time, like as you're growing up, you sort of just like put it out of your mind to such a degree where I didn't even know who the mayor was until the day before I Googled him. So yeah, I mean, I was completely checked out until that time.
Yeah. So you read the disparity report or you heard about it, and so how did that change your how that change your whole perspective on activism and getting involved?
Yeah, so really sort of what happened just before me reading the disparity report was the George Floyd incident. And so that sort of sparked this whole energy across the country, as we all know. And I wasn't immune from that. I started to sort of have those thoughts in my mind, like, what am I doing? Right? Like I'm sort of running my business, I'm raising my family, but I'm not doing anything for my broader community, like at all. Like I wasn't doing anything. I wasn't volunteering any of my time anywhere. And it just started making me think about that and what could I do. And again, because I had been checked out for so long, I just didn't really even know where to start. And so when I read the disparity report, um, it basically gave me the data behind what we had already seen growing up in East Lubbock. So as the city expanded to the southwest, every time it would move a little further out, everything behind it would decay a little more. And then we saw that it was so apparent to us because in historic North and East Lubbock, those areas never really got resources anyway. And so we could sort of really tell when things would start moving because we have to drive out of our communities to go get anything. And the quote unquote good side of town kept going further and further, right? So this was something that we were very aware of. Our parents and grandparents told us their experiences about living in Lubbock as people of color and all those sorts of things. So we heard all of the stories. We knew all of that. But again, being so checked out, a lot of our communities didn't know the policy decisions behind why that happened or how that continued to happen. And so that's what the disparity report laid out. And my life sort of flashed before my eyes as I'm reading the disparity report, because it really just brought everything into a very clear picture of how all of this happened. And then at that point, I just couldn't ignore it, right? Like I knew that I was going to stay here in Lubbock. I had made that decision long before I even thought about getting involved in community service. It's just where I want to live my life. And so I'm going to be here, right? And I couldn't unsee that information. And so I was just very energized by that. I went and sort of tried to ask some questions of the mayor at one of the coffee with the mayors that he would do. It didn't really go so well. And then that's sort of how I got brought into all of this, because I just felt like something had to be done. There's got to be some progress made here.
And then you go on to work with Dr. Nick Bergfeld on the Lubbock Compact. I don't know if you were a founding father of that, but it gets created. You're part of it. What's the purpose of Lubbock Compact? What was the vision of its creation?
Yeah, so it was really born out of the frustration of there being no accountability essentially for our local government. And prior to the time of Lubbock Compact coming about, there was really nobody showing up to city council meetings on a regular basis. There were some, I'm not going to say there were none, but there were some, very few people who would show up on a regular basis who were just citizens, right? Who were engaged and wanted to know what was happening.
Let
But
me
for
let me pause you there, because it's always the same people.
Yeah, 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 yeah. There's a lady Michael. Yeah, there's a lady Michael Ward.
Uh-huh.
She's one for sure. She's I don't know how old Miss Ward is. She's up there in age,
Yep.
but she's been going for a very long time, right? Like, so you had some of these people that would go, and like you said, it's always the same people. That's why we know their names.
You're exactly right. Okay, I'm sorry to cut you off there,
No,
but
no, you're good.
I just wanted to interject that. Go ahead.
Yeah, so there was really nobody sort of minding the store, if you will, right? And so our local lawmakers were just essentially allowed to do whatever they wanted unimpeded, nobody asking questions, nobody raising concerns. And so they were just sort of running away with things as they wanted to do. And what that was driven by, and still today to a large part, a lot of policy is driven by what the developer community wants, because cotton is a big industry here, as we know, but way up there on the list with where a lot of the wealth sits here in Lubbock is the real estate industry, right? And so they influence a lot of policy, and so sort of kind of whatever their whims would be, they would have those conversations and create those collaborations and make those happen. And then only if something really affected a community really negatively would they even really ever have to face any of the community members, right? So people would show up, but then they would, show up, they would be dismissed, they would go away mad, and then that was it, right? Like it was very spotty here and there. And so it grew out of the understanding that first and foremost, somebody needs to be watching what's happening, because just that act in and of itself, obviously, like we've heard, when people are on video camera, for instance, right, and they know that there's a camera present, they're going to act a very different way versus if they know that there's not a camera present, or if they're completely in private, right? And so we understand that concept, and it works the same way with government bodies, right? So like if they know that nobody's watching, then they're not going to care, right, what they do. But if they do know that it's just the simple act of somebody watching, they're going to sort of try to be a little more careful. Also, we needed some consistency in action. Like how I was talking about it was spotty, people would get mad, show up, go away, and there would be these long spells of nobody showing up again. And so we needed somebody to show up consistently, and for the council or any governmental body really to understand that there was going to be this entity that wasn't going to go away and was going to, attempt to hold them accountable. And so that's what it was really born out of. And then in terms of what we do about that, obviously the disparity report lays out some things, but also we have what's called Plan Lubbock 2040, which is our updated land use plan, which itself has a bunch of recommendations. And so that's sort of what we're focused on.
And do you think on how Lubbock Compact was created, along with the disparity report, would you so far think that you have been successful in accountability and all the other aspects you've been wanting to do here?
Yeah, we're all every single day blown away by the success that we've had. Never never would we have thought that in this short amount of time that we would have, a $500,000 EPA grant that we're administering, or that we would have had all of the different policy advocacy wins that we have had. In terms of accountability, I don't know that we're ever going to get to 100% success rate on that, because again, you've got some very powerful influences that from time to time are going to get their way, or at least get the majority of their way. And then that's the thing that I try to explain to people too, is that nobody's ever really going to get 100% of what they want, right? Like we got a big population here. Like if you're lucky, you'll get about 80% of what you want, right? But they are going to get what they want from time to time, depending on what the situation is. But there needs to be more of a balance there. And so we feel like that has been accomplished to a degree. We feel that at this point, city council and other sort of city admin staff and other governmental bodies, I think that they're aware that obviously that we're not going to go away, but I think that they're also aware that our heart is in the right place, right? We all are doing this because we deeply care about this community. Nobody pays us to do these things, right? And we spend a lot of time, like a lot of time. And so I think that we've had that success in that way, where we sort of have a mutual understanding, like, look, we all care about the place where we live in. We may disagree from time to time, but I think that they're aware that they just sort of have to engage with us, and that we're a part of that balance.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, keeping their feet to the fire is, accountability and transparency are some, very underrated aspects that groups need to really reinvest in, and that's just my assessment of it. But yeah, that's great. Now I want to just kind of fast forward a little bit more here and get to your candidacy, because we have a weak mayor system here in the city charter, and what that creates is a city manager council system. Did you think about city council whenever you decided to run? Did that come into your mindset, or were you just, hey, mayor sounds cool, I can make the most difference there, or did you have that sort of conversation with yourself and those around you about which position to pursue?
No. So I never thought that I would run for an office, period. And it was actually sort of the community, because of my advocacy work and policy work, that started to ask me to do that. And they specifically asked me to run for mayor. We have had conversations about, what does it look like if I'm in a council seat versus the mayor? I do think that from the mayor seat, I can be the most effective. Just to be absolutely frank with everybody, and I've told others who have asked me this, that I'm not going to sign up to be in a seat for 4 years where I know that I'm going to be ineffective, right? And there's a lot of reasons for that, and we could probably spend a whole show on just that. But it would not be as an effective a position as a city council person versus mayor. And so the reasons for that are a few. So as the mayor, I can talk to the entire city, right? And this comes up a lot when people say, well, are you going to be able to work with the council? So first and foremost, I already work with the councils, right? We don't always agree on everything, but we do agree on some things, right? Sometimes we call them out on things. Sometimes they voice their discontent with us, right? So there's some of that happens, but that's not the entire relationship, right? There's been plenty of things that we've worked on together and we'll continue to work on. So that's first and foremost. Second of all, the decisions that I make in terms of policy of what I pursue and what I'm trying to get accomplished come from the citizens. And they're not just citizens in one district, they're citizens across the city. So you look at like the loose dog issue. That happens across the city, right? You look at public pools, that affects people across the city, right? All of these sorts of different things. How walkable their areas are, how productive the places they live in are, you know, that affects people across the city. So that's what I'm bringing to the council is those concerns. And so it's not really for me to convince that council person. The people in the district are the better people to convince that council person. And so as a mayor, I can sort of appeal to the entire city. I can sort of go in more spaces in that way and state our case. And then they will let their council person know how they'd like them to vote. And that's, I think, how it should work.
All right. Thank you for addressing that. So let's talk a little bit about how you ran in 22, and now you're running again. What'd you learn from the last race that you're applying, or said that didn't work? Let's not do that again. What was there anything at all in that realm where you thought, hey, I learned from this and need to apply? Just kind of take it from there.
Yeah. So first, just underlying all of it is that I never did stop, obviously, engaging with the city and engaging with policy. And so I've also been, since that time, I've gone through what's called Lubbock 101, which is where you get to sort of tour city facilities and sort of learn behind the scenes a lot of the information about how the city operates, how it's funded, all of these sorts of things. So I've learned a whole lot more about policy and how the city operates in general. So that's sort of the biggest thing that I've learned since that time. In terms of actually campaigning, the biggest lesson that we took away, which we knew right away when we lost that election, was that we had to work on voter turnout. We had to get more people who normally don't vote in a May election to vote if we wanted to change leadership, because for the last 4+ decades, we've had less than 10% choosing, and we've seen how that shakes out every single time. So we have to raise the number of people that were voting. So that was the biggest lesson. And so that's where we spend a lot of our time. And that happens in a variety of ways, going to events, going door to door, talking to as many people as possible, just even in our daily lives, trying to have that necessary but oftentimes frustrating conversation about why people don't vote or why they don't want to vote or why they don't think that that's something they should do, and all of those sorts of things. And so that was the sort of key takeaway. And in terms of operations, I mean, last time we were flying the plane as we were going, so to speak, or building the plane as we were flying, I should say. And so the team that I have that works on the campaign learned so much that we could probably spend a whole show on just that. But they've learned a lot, even more than I, because I'm not directly involved in a lot of the operational stuff, you know. But yeah, we learned a whole lot.
That's great. You talk about the low voter turnout and a lot of these things, and especially in municipal elections. One thing that I found in my studies is that we have elections very, very quickly. And what I mean by that is that they're kind of rammed together. We have the primary that's in March, then possibly a runoff in May, and then before that is the municipal elections. And so we're asking people to, one, remember to get registered to vote 30 days before the election. Show up to vote. Oh, and then by the way, about 2 months later, there's going to be another election, and you need to be registered to vote by this time. And it's a weird system, and people get very confused and they get frustrated and they just throw their hands in the air and just say, forget it. So
Yeah.
I mean, it's an uphill battle on that, and that's great that you're working very, very hard to try to up that particular voter turnout, because it seems like it's always the same people who show up to the polls, and more of the same is really there if you're trying to be an aspect of an agent of change. That's my side little commentary there. I don't, you don't need to say anything about that, but so I wanted to kind of segue into your also activism into Freedom Act Lubbock, and you've addressed this a few times. I want to help my listeners to understand this too, because what Freedom Act Lubbock is wanting to do is decriminalize 4 ounces or less personal possession of marijuana. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Okay. So what do you say to those who say, boy, 4 ounces? Oh, that's a lot. I don't know if I can do that. You run a radio program just recently talking about this. Walk us through, help us understand.
Yeah, so what we were specifically targeting was misdemeanor possession. And so when you talk about crime punishment classifications, you have misdemeanor level, and then obviously you have felony level. So felony is a federal charge. And so if somebody's drug dealing, for instance, if they have like pounds of marijuana, that's a federal charge, right? That's not what our ordinance covers. And so we were just looking at specifically misdemeanor, and misdemeanor is your sort of lower level enforcement classifications. And so within that, you have different classes. And so you have class A, B, and C misdemeanors for a lot of different things. In terms of marijuana, there's class A and class B. So class B is 0 to 2 ounces. Now, it's a little deceptive because let's say somebody got caught with just like a joint or even like a roach, a very, very tiny amount of marijuana. They would get that 0 to 2 ounces charge. So if you were to see that on Lubbock County Mugshots Facebook page or whatever, right, you'd be like, oh my gosh, this person had 2 ounces of weed. Well, they probably didn't, because 9 times out of 10, what we're seeing is it is a roach. It's a joint. It's something very small. A lot of people are not even getting caught with 1 ounce, let alone 2. And so the class A misdemeanor is 2 to 4 ounces. So first of all, let's talk about where do these classifications come from? Those are set by the state. We can't do anything about that. And so again, we were just targeting a certain level and we took those. Those are set by the state. So let's talk about why somebody may have 2 or 4 ounces of marijuana. Well, when you look at somebody who uses regularly for some sort of medical condition, right? Let's say maybe they have chemo that they have to go through and they lose their appetite, and so they use marijuana on a daily basis so that they can eat, so that they can be healthy. Another person may have some sort of mental health situation happening, and the sort of normal opioid medications don't really vibe well with them. They don't like the side effects and all of those sorts of things. And so marijuana helps them better than those, right? So let's say somebody like that. So if you have a regular user of this nature, on the low end, somebody may go through 1 ounce in a month, right? That's on the low end. But if depending on the severity of what they're trying to deal with, they may use more than that, right? So they may use 2 to 4 ounces. Even if you're prescribed, so in Texas, we have what's called the Compassionate Use Care Act. And so let's say you were prescribed, you had a marijuana card and you were prescribed marijuana by your doctor. We have one of our volunteers who has epilepsy. And so without marijuana, her epilepsy essentially takes her out of the productivity of life. She wasn't able to hold a job. She wasn't able to go to school. She wasn't able to drive. She wasn't able to do any of those things until she got prescribed marijuana. And now she's a fully functional, productive adult, has a job, and is perfectly fine, right? She's prescribed at one time up to 10 ounces, right? And so somebody may look at that and say like, whoa, that's a lot. You know, why would they have that much? Well, let's look at some similar things, right? Let's look at something with no medical use whatsoever, beer, right? Many people will go and either get a case of bottles of beer, which is 24 bottles, or they'll go and they'll get a 30 pack of cans for their fridge, right? And they'll leave that in their fridge. Now, are you planning? I hope not, but are you planning on drinking that entire case or that entire 30 pack of beer in one sitting? I highly doubt it, unless you're like a college student, you're trying to like win a bet or something, right? But for the most part, people aren't going to just sit and try to consume themselves a 30 pack of beer in one sitting. Let's use another analogy, right? Something that is useful in your life: toilet paper. Now, do you want to go and buy the amount of toilet paper you're going to use for the day every single day?
Yeah.
No, of course not. You go and buy toilet paper in bulk so that you don't have to continue to go to buy toilet paper. You know you're going to use this stuff, right? Now, are you planning when you go and buy that, 64 roll thing from Costco, right? And you bring that home, are you planning on using all of that toilet paper in one sitting?
Boy, you hope not.
I hope not, right? Because you may want to go and see a doctor if you have to do that. But yeah, that's why somebody may have that amount. Now, let's say that somebody has any amount, whether it be 1 ounce, 2 ounce, 4 ounces, anything covered in this ordinance. If you have any amount of marijuana in this that's covered under this ordinance, and then you decide to break a piece of that off and go sell a joint to somebody, you now committed another crime, and this ordinance doesn't cover you. You're going to go to jail.
Thank you for explaining that. The counter argument, I think, that I can anticipate, I don't know, I can just think, I can only speculate, is, well, those things are legal. But marijuana possession is not, and this is a state thing. And the Attorney General said that this can't happen, and you're going to have all these lawsuits. What does Freedom Act Lubbock say about that? What do you say to that sort of thing?
Yeah, and so I mean, anything can be illegal at any one time. It doesn't necessarily mean that it should be, right? And the closest thing that we have to this issue that we're talking about right now, even though there are some very huge differences, right? But I guess if you want to look at something as similar as possible, it would be the prohibition of alcohol. Mm-hmm. Right. And we did that for a long time. And that created a lot of problems. And one of those being organized crime. Organized crime was able to sort of flourish and grow the way it did because of the Prohibition era, because it was something that people were not going to stop doing as adults, right? It was something that they felt was within their right as a human being, as long as I'm not harming anybody else, that I should be able to do this, right? And so you have something similar here. Now, prohibition of alcohol, we found out after a very long time, was not the right idea. We had the wrong idea. And even in our history books, we talk about we had the wrong idea, right? So laws can change. And sometimes laws don't need to change, right? We have lots of laws on the books that nobody would agree need to change. Those are good, right? Making murder illegal, leave that in, right?
Yeah. I think there's widespread support for that. Yeah.
Right. So there's certain laws that, yes, absolutely do not change. There's other certain laws that could, and maybe we could consider to change. This is one of those things. So it's not about breaking the law, because the sort of connotation there is that, and a lot of people we've talked to hold this belief is, well, if you consume marijuana, you're just a bad person, point blank, period. Mm-hmm. And that's just not accurate. There's so many people who are professional, productive people who are great parents, who are great grandparents, who do all of the things in life that we think somebody should do. They volunteer in their community, they do all these different things, and they consume marijuana. So you can't accurately say that every single person who just consumes marijuana off the rip is bad, right? And so again, a lot of these sort of arguments are sort of brought from a place of that. But we have so much evidence out there for anybody to find and see of the differences between this particular substance and even alcohol that we're comparing it to in this instance. Alcohol has literally no medicinal effect whatsoever, right? So by definition, so marijuana is a Schedule 1 drug in the United States. By definition, which is something that's highly addictive and has no known medical use, alcohol should be a Schedule 1 substance, whereas marijuana should not be, right? And so we know that it has lots of medical uses. We know that even on a recreational level, it does not affect the body in the negative ways as alcohol. And so the laws should change around this issue. And we do have it legal in a lot of different places. That's the other aspect to this is 28 states, I think it's legal. Many more cities have decriminalized. And so it's not as black and white as those folks would have you believe.
Yeah. That's a really good point, and it's I'm glad that you brought that up because I'm going to go into another segment here because you've seen some area state leaders who have actively campaigned against this sort of thing, which is rather amazing because when they campaign, they don't really say anything at all, just how great they are. Which we can talk about strategy and all that, but that's an interesting aspect. And one of the things that they say is this is going to harm law enforcement. This is just going to tangle up their hands, and it's going to do all this, and then it's going to have this whole slippery slope argument about how we'll lose oil and gas in this part of the state, which I never understood that argument. I'm still trying to find someone to explain it to me. I don't know, but Brad Burt from KTTZ, which for those who don't know is the Lubbock NPR station. He's a reporter there. Posted this very good thread on X, and everyone should go find him and go read that. But walk us through this argument about what this will do to law enforcement. I'm not necessarily asking you to tell me their side. I'm just curious what I'm just curious what what you argue about how what this will do to the police.
Yeah, so first and foremost, some context that everybody should know that really
Yes.
doesn't get brought up a lot. It has in one form is that the law enforcement officers themselves are split on this issue. They are not a monolith. They don't all believe the same way. Okay, so we had LPD officers, sheriff's deputies, and other law enforcement people sign our petition. Just so everybody knows, they signed the petition and they're going to go vote for it. They're going to go vote for it in favor of it.
Appreciate you adding that in. Thank you for that.
Yeah. So that's first and foremost. So they're not all a monolith on this. Now, I've obviously Sheriff Kelly Rowe has come out. He is coming up for election, coming up here in a couple of years, and so that probably has more to do with his stance currently than whatever he may or may not feel about it. And then the state leaders themselves, again, I think that a lot of that energy is really more so to appease the voters who they feel are going to keep them where they're at. Okay. And that's the short story of it.
Yeah.
But in terms of what does it actually do for police or to police? Okay. First and foremost, it doesn't do anything to police. It literally takes something off of their plate. All right. Now, when you look at what Sheriff Rowe has been putting out there, which is, oh, well, we only have 8 people in jail for this right now. Or when we were at the forum, he sent a guy up there and was like, as of 3 p.m., Sheriff Rowe said there was 1 person in the jail for this, right? So first and foremost, we never ever asserted that we had our jails filled with people with low level marijuana possession. We never said that, not once. There's nowhere you can find us saying that. What we have said is based on the data of what we actually do. So where does that data come from? Just to sort of put the disclaimer out there. It comes from LPD itself, Lubbock Police Department. That came to us via open records request directly to us when we requested that information. And again, another disclaimer, no, there was not any other crimes connected to those arrests. We looked specifically for arrests where it was possession only, nothing else, no other charges. So we separated all that out from the beginning. So LPD self-reported that to us via open records request. We also checked that same information that they also self-report to what's called the National Incident-Based Reporting System for the FBI. The FBI maintains the system for the nation so that law enforcement can utilize that information if should they need to. And they self-report that same information to the FBI and it matches. So unless somebody is willing to say that LPD is lying about their numbers, which we have no evidence to show that they are, then those are the numbers we have. And so what do they say? The numbers say that we arrest in Lubbock, Texas, 600 to 700 people a year for this with no other charges, just this. So 600 to 700 a year is a lot. And let me tell you why, even if it was just one officer, but let me sort of explain to somebody and walk you through what does it look like on the ground if this happens. All right, person is encountered in the public and an officer smells marijuana. All right. When they do that, they're going to automatically escalate that situation. And there's going to be another officer because that's protocol. They're not supposed to go into what could be potentially a dangerous situation from their perspective alone. Okay, so they're going to automatically escalate that situation and get another officer on the scene, which will be there in moments. So they usually get that second officer there pretty quick. So now you have two officers approaching this vehicle. You're going to get the person out of the vehicle. You're going to sort of question them. And then you're going to tell them, we're going to look through your car because we smell marijuana. When they do that and they locate that substance, let's say they find a little baggie or they find a little joint or a roach or something like that, they're going to then escalate that further, and there's going to be at least another one, maybe two officers on the scene before it's all done, because they're going to test that substance on the road, all of those sorts of things. And so 3 to 4 officers are going to be taken off of the streets for hours. And depending on which officer goes and books that individual into the jail, that's 6 to 8 hours of their time that we just took them off of the street for somebody that had a little joint or something, when they could have been going after somebody that was involved in a property crime. They could have been going after somebody distributing fentanyl in the community, all these other more important things that are higher priority. And so that's what it really looks like. That's a lot of resources. And the last thing I'll finish with, and I'll kick it back to you, we couldn't get the actual cost in dollars of that because we asked the DA. We submitted a request for the DA's office. We submitted a request for LPD, as well as the sheriff's office. All of those entities told us that they don't keep records in that way, so that they would have to produce the records, and they were each going to charge us a different amount, but they were all in the many thousands of dollars, and we don't have that much money. So we weren't able to get that data to tell you the actual dollar amount. But if you just think it out, and then that's not even including them going through the court system. Yeah. And our DA is also backlogged. And so do we want them backlogged with low-level marijuana offenses, or do we want them to be dealing with cases that are more serious?
Yeah, that's thank you for walking me through that, and also our the listeners, because they get this information that says, oh, well, the cops aren't, just gonna have to let them go. And then they see and then there's this disassociation, this I shouldn't say disassociation, there's just misinformation that suddenly some trafficker, some cartel is going to bring in 7 pounds of marijuana, but under Freedom Act, that'll be illegal. No, that's not the case at all. Right. Yeah. So good. It's interesting that you mentioned that you got those stats from LPD, Lubbock Police Department. Is that on your website? Is that on Freedom Act Lubbock's website where we can check that out?
There is the marijuana impact report is there for Lubbock on our website, and yeah, you can check that out, and it does have that graph in there.
Great, thank you for that. Now, one of the last questions I want to ask you here, and then we'll wrap this up. Just to kind of get away from Freedom Act Lubbock and into your mayoral campaign here, people like to get stuck on the number 3. Like Monty Python and the Holy Grail, 3 shall be the number of the counting, and the counting of the number shall be 3. So, what are 3 items of your agenda that you become mayor? What are that you would like to see done?
Yeah, so first and foremost, we have to get a completely different mind frame into the leadership. And what I mean by that is that up until this point, there seems to be an attitude by the mayors in particular that they sort of show up, run the meetings, they hear things from city staff, they give their signature on some things, and that's it. They call it a day. There's nothing else they can do past that. Yeah. When a lot of these different issues that we need to address, the loose dog issue, all of these sorts of different things, that's going to take collaboration on a large scale, right? You're going to need there's a lot of stakeholders in that situation. You have animal rescues, you have community members who take in animals on a regular basis. You have community members that have been attacked. You've got the vets, you've got animal control and the officers there. Like, you've got LPD that needs to be brought into that conversation. You've got a lot of different entities that need to be brought to bear and sort of brought on the same page to deal with that issue. And if you're just going to sort of phone it in, that's not going to happen, right? You're going to have to be actively doing that in between city council meetings, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what I mean, is you have to have that mind frame of how to get those things done and the willingness to put in the work. So that's first and foremost. The second big thing is to improve public health and safety. And the loose dog issue is a public safety issue, and there's others, right? And then the last one is make quality of life improvements, and not just so that we can say, oh, we got a nice neighborhood, but because of all of the various effects that come from that. And a big part of that is how we develop our city. But what that will do is that will make us financially stronger for the long term as a city, as well as less reliant on debt over time, as well as making it a nicer place to live for everybody.
Right. Yeah. You mentioned about quality of life, and I want to throw in there. I think it's interesting about the crime rate here in Lubbock, and I think it's interesting because not just because, well, crime rate's interesting, but I want to, but it's interesting because we haven't had a chief of police for like 5 months. Um, I'll ask for your take on this. You can pass if you want to, but I think that's rather ridiculous to not have a police chief for 5 months. That seems like there's a little bit of, I don't know what to make of that. I don't know what word would accurately describe that other than odd. I mean, tell me what do you make of that? Isn't 5 months too long?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's gone on a little long. Here's a couple of things. So I was not even really a fan at sort of how the situation was handled with Chief Mitchell. I think Chief Mitchell was doing a good job. I think that had he been given enough time to sort of make improvements, we were already seeing improvements, but if he would have been given more time, we probably would have seen more improvements over time, because that's before you can have sort of any sort of consistent improvement, you have to have some sort of consistency in leadership, right? So like, he wasn't here that long. And so I think we sort of did ourselves a disservice by just sort of kicking him out so abruptly. And we don't even know that the whole situation surrounding why he made that resignation. Okay. We
Right.
do know about the whole sort of 911 call situation and that whole thing, right? But we didn't really know all of the surrounding circumstances of why he just so abruptly left. And so that's first and foremost. Second of all, the interim chief that we have now, I've had a chance to meet him and talk to him, and he seems like a nice guy. And he sort of just told me, I'm sort of here just sort of holding the chair down. I mean, obviously he's working, he's doing actual work, so we're not paying him to do nothing, but he's sort of there to fill that spot. And he made it very clear that he was already retiring. So I don't know how exactly he got roped into Lubbock, but he got roped in. But he's very excited to go and start to help raise his grandbabies and all that. So like, he's done, right? He's not hanging around. And so I don't fault him for anything in the situation. But the thing about the candidates for chief of police is, I was disappointed to see that there's not one candidate from within LPD itself. And I don't have enough information to know why that is. Why would we make a decision to not sort of promote from within the ranks already somebody who's been here, somebody who knows the community, somebody who's had that consistency, who knows the DNA, if you will, of what all is going on, right?
Yeah.
To me, it seems to make the most sense to have somebody like that be candidates, and maybe have several candidates, I guess, from within the ranks is fine. I'm just saying it seems like it makes more sense to me to promote from within the ranks versus going outside, because I mentioned this in a forum recently. I've worked jobs, right? Like I haven't always just been an entrepreneur. I've worked many jobs. And so I know exactly what it's like to be an employee. I know what it's like to get promoted from within a company and get passed over for something. I know all of those things, right? And it's demoralizing. If you've been somewhere putting your heart and soul into it, you've been busting your butt, you've been a big reason why there's improvements, and then all of a sudden big promotion comes up and we just automatically reach outside of the city of Lubbock to bring somebody in who doesn't know anything about the community. Sure, they probably know things about policing, but they don't know our community, right? Like that takes time, and so that's demoralizing. And so we know that there's already a morale problem, and I just don't think that it makes a lot of sense to do that. I don't know any of those gentlemen. I'm looking forward to hearing more from them, and maybe we'll learn a lot more about them. But I just think it seems like a bad move to me, and I'm not exactly sure why we made that choice. But yeah, we definitely need some strong, consistent leadership. So hopefully we get that.
Yeah, I guess there's supposed to be a meet and greet here pretty soon. I don't have the date in front of me
Yeah.
to really say when that is. But yeah, that's I've always scratched my head as to the situation surrounding the last police chief, and there's a lot of rumor and innuendo, and we can only speculate because nobody will say anything forward. They may have signed non-disclosure agreements to where they legally can't, and so I get all that, but when you're left with us just to speculate, and then they will get upset whenever I speculate, well, that's all you gave me. So what am I supposed to do? So I guess they would rather me just be quiet and go away. But whatever. So anyway, just to wrap up here, give me your. I mean, you've done this before and on other stations, and I find it to be endearing, and it's also kind of cool. Give us like a final wrap up of what we can expect, and how the campaign's going, and why everyone should support you.
Yeah. Well, the campaign is going great. We definitely aren't able to raise the money that the sort of establishment candidates that are running have been able to raise. And so with that being the case, though, we have had an abundance of volunteers. And so that's been a huge blessing. I mean, people really dedicating hours that they could bill out thousands of dollars for, doing that for free for the campaign. And as well as people block walking. You may have seen the team out block walking in your neighborhood doing lit drops and things like that. And so the campaign's going really well. I myself am trying to be in as many places as possible without being able to clone myself. And so just trying to talk to as many people as possible, answer as many questions as possible. I do the fireside chats, which is a live stream that I do every Sunday for the campaign to, again, make myself accessible, answer questions, put as much out there as I can for you to be able to make an informed decision about me as the candidate. And so it's all been going really, really well. And so in terms of why somebody may want to vote for me, well, if you are sort of tired of things going the same way in Lubbock, and we hear about it all the time, things never change, the leadership changes, things never change. The reason for that is that less than 10% of the people in our city have been choosing the leadership for the other 90% for at least 4 decades. And that's why it produces the same results. It's the same people showing up, right? And so we have to change that. And so we can absolutely make these improvements to our public health and safety. We can absolutely make these quality of life improvements. It's not some like far off, unreachable dream. We are in good shape financially as a city at this moment in time. We can take advantage of that and get these things done, and also do it in a much smarter way so that we're financially stronger for the long term and less reliant on debt over time. Because the thing that I'm worried about is our children and grandchildren. You and I, who are listening to this program right now, are going to be fine. If you're 40 years old or so, you're going to be fine, right? We're going to be able to experience all of these nice new areas of town that have sprung up out of nowhere. We're going to be able to go to all those nice places. But what about our kids and grandkids? Are they going to be able to drive through there and see the same thing? Or are they going to see crumbling infrastructure? Are they going to see a city that's struggling with a whole lot of expensive problems to fix? That's what I'm worried about, right? And we can absolutely set them up for success, but we have to do that now. If you want to do all of those things, take care of the loose dog issue, bring public pools back, make these quality of life improvements, then we have to get the people off of the sideline who don't normally vote in May. And so the thing that I've been telling people, if you don't normally vote in May, you are the solution. All you got to do is show up, but we have to increase the numbers. So bring yourself and 4 other people who you know also don't normally show up to vote in May, and we can absolutely have this change that everybody so desperately wants and needs. So I would hope that you consider me as your candidate of choice. And if you see me out and about, feel free to come ask me questions at any time. Thanks.
Where can everyone find you?
Yeah, so you can go to adamhformayor.com. I'm also Adam Hernandez for Mayor on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. And feel free to reach out on any of those platforms as well.
And when's election day, and when is early voting?
So early voting starts on Monday, April 22nd, and it goes through April 30th, which is a Tuesday. And so you'll have those 9 days. I do encourage everybody to go during early voting because you can go to any United supermarket and you'll be in and out. You can do it while you're shopping for your groceries, get it done, and you'll be done. Election day is May 4th. So just some really quick, just some tips for people when you go to vote, because I know that especially if you don't vote all the time, or maybe you haven't voted in a long time, or maybe you voted never, maybe you just got registered to vote for this and you've never been. Here's some tips to make it a little less intimidating or a little less overwhelming. So first and foremost, all you're ever going to need when you show up to vote is your ID, your driver's license, ID, whatever, right? That's all you're going to need when you show up. You don't have to worry about finding your voter registration card or any of that. Just show up with your ID, you're good to go. Second thing is you don't have to vote for everything or everyone. If you don't know, there's going to be a lot of people and a lot of different things on your ballot. If you don't know any of those people or those things, you can leave them blank. It's totally fine. If all you want to go in there is vote for Adam Hernandez for mayor and I want to vote for Prop A, you can vote for those 2 things, leave the rest blank, and walk out. You don't have to know about all of those things because I know that can be overwhelming. And if you don't have time, you're just not able to do that, right? So that's the second big tip. Third big tip is that nobody anywhere will ever be able to know who or what you voted for. Not your mom and dad, not your boss, not your professor, not anybody. You don't have to worry. They'll be able to tell that you voted, that you showed up and you voted. They won't be able to tell who or what you voted for at all. Nobody will. I can't see that. Nobody can see that. And so you don't have to be worried about any repercussions for voting for how you feel, especially if you're in a situation where people around you, and we've seen this many times, where people around you make you feel uncomfortable if you don't want to vote the way they want you to vote or whatever the case may be. So those are the 3 big tips that I have for voting. Just please, everybody show up and bring 4 people with you.
Right. Thank you so much for your time today, Adam. I appreciate it, and good luck to you, man.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
See ya.
Right. And that is all for the Outsider podcast today. Just wanted to follow up on one small thing that Adam said there. There's 7 acceptable forms of photo identification. You can find those on the Secretary of State's website. But I wanted to just tell you what they are instead of just having you go find them. You can use your driver's license, your U.S. passport, your military ID, your license to carry. You can have your a citizenship certificate with a photo. You can get an election ID, and I want to say there's another one. But your student ID does not work. So if you are a college student looking at this, you cannot use your student ID for that. It is your driver's license and your U.S. passport, your military ID, license to carry, an election ID. You can actually get a Texas state ID and a citizenship certificate with a photo. And those are the 7 acceptable forms in the state of Texas to use when you go vote. Appreciate everyone being here today. My thanks to Adam Hernandez for coming by. I am going to try to do more of candidate interviews and see how they all feel with you, the listener, and more on that as we go forward. I realize this is more of a, I've been focusing a lot on local things here for more of my statewide audience. I understand that. You may not be too interested in that. I get it. But do note that once this election takes place, I will be focusing more on statewide issues, particularly with the runoffs in the Republican primary and how that will play out going forward throughout the summer. All right. Thanks, everybody. Again, appreciate everyone listening. Follow Adam, follow him on those social platforms that he mentioned. Go check him out. Go look at the other candidates if you're interested and you're in the Lubbock area. You can also find me on Twitter at or X at Drew L. Landry. You can also find me on Instagram at drew.l.landry. Same thing there on Threads. You can also find me on Blue Sky at drewllandry.bsky.social. And all of those things you can find there. I always mention them at the end of my free posts. At least I'm starting to do that now. And thanks everyone for listening. I appreciate everybody, and we'll see you again very, very soon. Thank you.